Hello there. My name is Daniel Burgess, and today we are going to talk about image repair theory. And specifically, the topic or subject, I guess I should say, that we're going to critique using image repair theory is Samsung's fiery Galaxy Note phones. So the question that has to be asked is really, what would you do if your phone, which is the lifeline of so many, the majority of people in the whole world today, just caught fire and or exploded on you? We're going to discuss that exact situation and what the response was, what the damage to the reputation was, and what was the overall outcome. In my opinion, image repair theory could have been utilized and better, and more could have been done in this case to maximize a culture of forgiveness with consumers to fix it was a catastrophic series of events regarding this product and just how it affected so many different people in their everyday lives. Before we get to all that, though, let's talk a little bit about what exactly image repair theory is. Image repair theory or image restoration theory is basically guidelines that can be utilized to restore the image or reputation of a company or an individual when it's been damaged or tarnished by a specific event. The theory is most useful in organizational or individual crisis situations, but it can also be used, as we're doing it right now, to understand and critique past crisis situations. Image repair theory, its entire purpose is to insulate a company, organization, or individual from negative public reaction that can destroy its image. When it comes to the theory, there's two conditions that must be present. Number one, the accused is held responsible for an action, and number two, the act is considered offensive in nature. In almost every crisis situation where image repair theory can be applied, there are generally two ideas that must be assumed. Number one, communication is a goal-directed activity, and number two, maintaining perception of a good image, saving face, or fixing a reputation is the ultimate goal of the communication. So when you break it down and you start to get into actual image restoration theory, they have 5 basic strategies with a few subsections of strategies. And I'm going to go over those real quick. So first of all, there is denial. Denial is exactly what that word would imply. It is denying the fact that this act even happened at all. The second strategy would be evading responsibility. So basically, if you can't deny it, you just try to dodge it. And within that evading responsibility section, there's 4 subsections. One of them is called provocation. And that is saying that the act was a response to a previous wrongful act. Another one is defeasibility. And defeasibility is just claiming lack of knowledge. You just didn't know anything about it. The third one would be accidents. Just it was an uncontrollable accident. And the fourth one would be good intentions. So on the fourth one, you're just saying the motives of the act were good. They weren't bad. It didn't really work out how I wanted, but my intentions were good. The third characteristic of this theory is called reducing offensiveness. Reducing offensiveness is attempting to make an audience feel more positive after the negative act. And there are 6 subsections of it, 6 ways to go about trying to do that. One is called bolstering. Bolstering is where you remind the audience of your positive past. What have you done for what you used to do, how your reputation was. Another would be minimization. And that is convincing the audience the act is just, it's not that bad. It wasn't the worst thing in the world. One more would be differentiation. I can't speak. And that's comparing the act to more offensive acts that you didn't commit, preferably. Transcendence. That is placing the act in a broader, more generalized context. Another one is attacking the accuser, which is exactly what you would think it means. You just attack the person who's accusing you, or a group of people. They just, question their integrity or credibility. And finally, compensation. You just pay them off. Compensate those who are affected. Another category of the theory of repair is corrective action. During corrective action, you make claims or attempt to actually fix or correct the problem. It's one of the bigger ones. That's what most big companies would do in a crisis situation. But the one that everybody does without fail is the final one, mortification. Take responsibility for the act, apologize for the act, and then ask for forgiveness. So that is it's an oversight of exactly what it is, image repair theory. So let's get to the meat and potatoes of this whole little talk we're having and discuss exactly what happened with Samsung and the Galaxy Notes that were blowing up on people. So basically, in August of 2017, Samsung, which is it's a South Korean mega electronics conglomerate who everybody's heard of, released their newest version of the Galaxy phone series, the Galaxy Note 7. Its catch was that it supposedly had the biggest battery available on a cell phone, capable of the longest charge time of any battery before it. However, by the end of that initial month and into early September, there were reports starting to surface that the phones were overheating really badly. They were melting in some cases, malfunctioning, and sometimes even exploding or starting fires. Samsung then proceeded to delay shipments at that point and issued a recall on the Galaxy Note 7s. The CEO of Samsung came out, issued a statement of apology to the public, and the first recall had begun. But that wasn't even close to the end of the crisis. Samsung proceeded with the recall program, exchanging almost 1 million phones and claiming they were now safe. But before the end of even that month, September 2017, the same problems were arising with the new replacement phones. Going into October, the crisis was full-blown. It was happening all over the world. In the United States alone, there were hundreds of cases. And Samsung had to cancel production on the whole line and all shipments of the Galaxy Note 7 phones. Cell phone companies began to stop selling them. Airlines were beginning to ban them, and a second recall was issued. But this time it wasn't for a replacement phone, but for automatic refunds. So Samsung was losing a lot of money. Stocks dropped significantly. Consumers obviously lost confidence in not just that specific product, but Samsung products as a whole. That is evidence enough as to why the image repair theory relates to this case. Samsung's reputation was clearly tarnished, and it meets all the criteria necessary at that point to use this theory. So when it comes to some of the messages that were coming out of Samsung at the time, the one that I feel like was the biggest mistake was just the ultimate silence. Samsung was quiet about the whole incident for weeks after there were big problems already going on. Now, as far as image repair restoration goes, I don't think that really counts as denial because you're not really saying anything at all. I think it appears that Samsung itself maybe was in denial, but I mean, they didn't come out and say, oh, nothing's wrong, everything's fine. The phone might explode, but it's okay. That's not, that wasn't happening. So I don't really think it applies, but there was this silence. I think it's more of an indication of evading responsibility just through silence other than really, and that's not really covered in this theory. But at one point, a spokesperson for Samsung said that the problems were arising because customers were using the wrong charger boards. That kind of message screams of attacking the accuser, but I don't really think that, I mean, I think that is a terrible strategy to use in this case. The CEO of Samsung did come out and make a public apology early on in the crisis, just before the first recall. So there was an example of attempt at mortification. But besides that, after that, the second recall, there was pretty much just silence, aside from straight compensation. So there was 2 recalls. One that replaced the devices, and the second time for the refund of devices, it does show coercive action taken and ultimately then compensation. It isn't until January of 2017 that Samsung finally comes out with an explanation. Then they take responsibility for everything that happened, and then the attempts to regain some forgiveness from their customers who were affected and had lost confidence in them finally begin. It's not until then that the really truly mortification is shown in this case. So in my opinion, I think Samsung dropped the ball on this one. I feel like, for starters, the initial response was lacking, to say the least. Just issuing a recall doesn't instill a lot of confidence in consumers about a product. I think consumers just want to have their hand held a little bit, so to speak, when they feel like they've been wronged. There was very little of an apology or even acknowledgement about the issue early on, and I think that was a mistake. I mentioned earlier about how there was a denial of sorts, but not the kind of denial that applies to restoring one's image. To me, it implies a little bit of arrogance on their part. There should have been a response. It should have been quick, and it should have been early on in this process. You know, when some of the very first reports were coming out, just to let the customers know that there is a problem, they are aware that there is a problem, and they're doing what they can to fix that problem, just to show that they care. After that, I do think they handled the situation a little better. It seems like after the initial shock that this was happening, they do show coercive action. They're trying to make up for the problems that were caused. There was obviously compensation for damages to property and to those who were injured, and there was actually people injured during this. And those are showings of goodwill. So the coercive action part of it, they got down. And then ultimately, in the end, they didn't make an attempt to make things right by figuring out what the problem was. They were very open and honest about it. They released the findings to the public with a sincere apology and promise that it would never happen again. So finally, the whole cycle of mortification was established, albeit 5 months after the fact. But better late than never, I suppose. Anyway, that is my analysis of Samsung and their Fiery Note 7s. I hope it was informative. Thank you for paying attention. Take it easy.